it's all about timing, right? So this round was going to come together in short order anyway. So what is the pros behind waiting versus doing it now? The pro of doing it now is very clearly you have the traction, you have the momentum. You guys just doubled ARR in like literally 12 weeks. The companies coming on board, the companies in the sales pipeline are really high quality. If you can raise the round, again, at very little founder time spent, which in this case was literally 3.5 days until term sheet fully signed and everything sorted out. That was the biggest pro, frankly. So where I would recommend probably against doing this is if you don't have a line of sight into your commercial traction or customer adoption, because then at that point you're starting to over raise money and you get in this territory as a founder where you really don't want to be. For me, the outcome of what we're building is so large as a company. Like the terms are very attractive of this offer already. Could we have optimized basically maybe by waiting for 3 to 4 months to raise the round then and everything else? Maybe. But then the flip side of that, at that point, if you're actively raising around in that market and then as a founder, you get taken out of the business for even if it's just a couple of weeks, the opportunity costs of that time are exponentially higher.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Funded, the series where we pull back the curtain on the fundraise process and get real tactical insights from founders who have successfully navigated the venture capital landscape. Today's conversation is one I'm really excited to share with you because we're talking to someone who's disrupting an industry that's near and dear to our hearts at Air CFO. Our guest today is Nicolas Kopp, the CEO and founder of Rillet. And if you hadn't heard of Rillet yet, you probably aren't watching the accounting tech space. Rillet made major headlines this past month by announcing their second major fundraise in a 3-month time period. In May of this year, Rillet announced a $25 million Series A led by Sequoia, which is impressive in its own right. But then in August, they followed that up with a $70 million Series B led by Andreessen Horowitz and Iconic. So that's $100 million raised in what Nick will tell you was essentially 11 days of fundraising work. But he didn't succeed in his fundraise just on the basis of those 11 days alone. Rillet is building an exceptional product that is shaking up an industry that hasn't seen real innovation in decades. They're creating an AI-native ERP system. Think of it as a modern alternative to QuickBooks or NetSuite, and they're already supporting over 200 companies. In the time period after their Series A, they doubled ARR in 12 weeks, and their software has an NPS score of 71, which it goes without saying is unheard of for an accounting software. What I really love about this conversation is that Nick gets into the nitty-gritty of how they compressed their Series A into 8 days, explains why they decided to take that preemptive Series B so quickly, and lays out the signals that told him that it was the right move. We also got to deep dive into what parts of AI are actually being implemented in finance today. And Nick shares his vision for a 0-day close for unlocking deeper accounting insights and giving accountants a strategic seat at the table. So whether you're a founder thinking about fundraising, a finance professional curious about the future of the industry, or just someone interested in how successful startups scale, this conversation is packed with insights that you'll actually be able to use. So let's jump into my conversation with Nicolas Kopp from Rillet. All right. So I'm not going to give the bio, but I would love to turn it over to you to start off by telling our team a little bit about Rillet and your mission and what you're building in pursuit of that mission. So take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, I'm Nicolas Kopp, CEO and founder of Rillet. We're building an AI-native ERP. So very much focused on the mid-market, accounting, revenue recognition, multi-entity, multi-currency, reporting, controls, all these type of fun things. And we're very excited about it.
Amazing. And you have shown a lot of momentum recently. 2 funding rounds in the bank already at the end of or the midpoint of Q3 here in 2025, which I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about. But to start off, just so that our team has some context on where Rillet fits into sort of like the back office tech market map, could you just give a brief overview of what are some of the signals that a company might be a great fit for Rillet as opposed to QuickBooks or Xero on one side and NetSuite or a similar ERP system on the other?
Yeah. So if every company starts on QuickBooks and Xero. So if you're a smaller company, often people don't really care what system they're on. They work with someone awesome like your CFO to help them run the books, and the back end software matters, frankly, less. There is a point at which you may start insourcing your tech stack, or even while you're with Air CFO, start considering other options. And there, the graduation points are usually a revenue recognition, deferred revenue, invoicing, a lot of pain there when you just have more and more customers and need to do that work for. Especially if you're in consumption and usage-based pricing and have some of these emerging models there, which emerging or slash mainstream shortly. That's where we also differentiate very well against the NetSuite or some of the more upmarket systems. Then a differentiation point number two is multi-entity, multi-currency. So if you need to have consolidated multiple entities, multiple currencies across geos in one platform, there's a very strong offering there against QBO or Xero that doesn't really have functionality there, or even a NetSuite that is just quite clunky to wrestle and wrangle. And then number three and four, but I'll focus on three, maybe more relevant for your audience, is reporting. We have very robust reporting, also GAAP and non-GAAP management reporting in the system, which is much easier to digest and use, including using AI to like parse through and analyze some of this data. So these are usually the 3 points that people come over to for Rillet for. And then the fourth one for more mature teams is permissions, controls, approvals, these type of things.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I was listening to your conversation on what is it called? TBPN as prep for this talk. And you were talking about how the CFO and the controller and the accountant and the board member of a company all have different views that are important to them. And they're all going to have different reports that are going to be most relevant. And so I think on the reporting side, that is a key way that Rillet could differentiate against QuickBooks, whose reporting is stuck in the early 2000s. Yeah, no, that's really helpful context. Thank you for talking through that. So just to lay out the roadmap for this conversation, I've got some questions around your last two fundraise processes, as this series Funded is meant to pull back the curtain on the black box that is the fundraise cycle. And so I'd love to get into the weeds around some just different aspects of your Series A, which happened it was announced in May, and then your Series B, which quickly followed a few months later. And then once we get through the fundraising questions, I have some other questions about future of finance and the back office tech stack, some of those really like topics that are interesting to the folks on this call that we wouldn't necessarily cover in a normal funded conversation, but I think will lead to some really interesting insights. So yeah, sound like a plan?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. So walk me through what happened between May, which is when you announced your $25 million Series A, and then July, when you announced that you were raising another 70 million. This is obviously something that we don't see every day in the venture landscape. And so, yeah, we'd just love to get a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what transpired that led to you raising that second round so quickly.
Yeah. So I think the context to the whole company arc here, which is it's very exciting. We are very prominently in the news or in people's minds these days around like basically disrupting an industry that hasn't seen change in like 25 to 30 years. So it's very exciting times. It feels very intense. Being in it, obviously as a founder, but also I think externally, there's a lot of people taking interest, a lot of momentum, a lot of inbound interest, a lot of partner interest. So it's been really exciting to witness. The key thing I think that people maybe don't understand as well is sort of like how long the company has been in the making for, basically. So it's a little bit like, I wouldn't even call us a success just yet. Like I think we have very large ambitions, so we're still at 1% of where we want to climb. But still, it feels like everybody's talking about Rillet these days. So the company arc is we've been in stealth for like almost 2 years, just quietly grinding and building away at what is Rillet today. Building an ERP system from the ground up is no joke, basically. You need to have deep accounting, technical expertise. deep engineering expertise, you need to have AI expertise, you have data integrations, systems, platforms. Like this is a really intense build. And so it took us quite some time actually to get to a point where we had a ready product for the market. And so we announced, it came out of stealth last summer. That was in, as time of recording, it's August 25. So that's a year ago or a little over a year ago, we came out of stealth. And really what feels like an overnight success and a lot of momentum has been just like in the making for a very long time. When we were ready, we released a few features. We had a lot of early happy customers. It kind of took off from there. And that then transpired into Series A that we raised and announced in May of this year, 2025, from Sequoia. They're like known for backing like really generational businesses or businesses that can have a real dent on a large industry profession. And so they saw that potential in us, and it was very aligned also with how I was thinking about what we're building. And then the back-to-back arc is we doubled our ARR in the matter of 12 weeks, which is extremely fast, even in the area of AI companies that are growing very quickly. And then we also are making really good progress on hiring out a good team, hiring out that bench, scaling all these different operational processes. So it's really a good execution game that when the offer came in, it was a preemptive offer. It was basically for me a no-brainer to take it on, unlock even bigger customers from here with more capital, and just pouring gasoline into a fire and structure that was building very rapidly. So that's a maybe long-winded answer to like the whole context of the business, but that it's basically a culmination of recent events that was in the making for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, did the narrative shift at all between your Series A and Series B, or was it more a matter of you have all this pent up demand and your team executed really well to onboard these new customers and start recognizing that ARR? So you just realized that this is a company that's ready to start scaling up, and that's why your second round was preempted.
Yeah. So it's really the latter. So I think it's commercial traction and intensifying commercial traction. Just if you look at it a cohort basis, everything's up and to the right, basically. Logo quality, and all the early indicators that basically investors are looking for. Our customer reviews are really high. We have an NPS of 71. Like it's just it's a really intense sort of a journey that we're on that people recognize. And then, yes, we are building out team structure for it. And given we also had a lot of interest for the Series A already, I knew a lot of these, not a lot, I knew every single person that was part of this B raise. I already knew for a long time before. And we were in deep talks for the A. So for them, it was just like, okay, additional proof points that also gave them the confidence to move quickly on basically an emerging category here. And the leader in the space. So it was a sort of like a culmination of again hard work, intense demand for the round that we did in May with Sequoia. That then, with additional proof points, it became clear that this is the company to back, basically.
Yeah. The NPS of 71 is very impressive for a general ledger system. I'm sure that Rillet feels like a breath of fresh air for companies that are used to having to
Exactly these
navigate
words.
through. Is that what they say? Breath
Yeah.
of fresh air?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good sign. It sounds like the product market fit is very strong. How many companies do you support today? Just kind of ballpark. I'm sure the number changes by the day, but
It literally changes by the day. And for folks also listening, we were trying to get back to your inbound requests as quickly as you can. This is not a humble flex, but genuinely, like the team is working tirelessly to respond quickly and move quickly. And yeah, we just crossed the 200 mark. It's growing quick, but also very much focus on customer size and sort of basically sophistication there, and that's also growing quickly, which I feel very honored by. The sort of the types of companies and the sophistication of the users that are taking interest in what we're doing. And so yeah, we're working as hard as we can to basically serve up to the expectations and the needs that people are placing in us by now.
yeah, the stakes have been raised over the last few months, it seems. And I know that you and the team have been working really hard to fulfill all that demand. As specifically as you can pinpoint it, is there a customer segment or a use case that has been the top catalyst for all of this growth? I guess like who is your number one ICP?
Yep. Yep. So number one ICP currently, so also that is rapidly changing. So at the time of recording, we kind of need to preface with that, but we are a very deep penetration adoption with technology companies by now. So there's a lot of tech businesses, usually inventory and asset light companies. That is one big sort of area where we don't focus on yet. We will and we are over time, but for now we just need to constrain a little bit our funnel and demand to be able to absorb it effectively, and also doubling down on use cases that are really tailor made for a certain set of audiences. So it's a lot of tech businesses, professional services, agencies, fintech, with some other financial services. So it's a really well-rounded group of individuals, but it all skews towards like like asset light type of businesses, in a sense that they don't have hard supply chain and inventory components, or too hard. We have some light ones, but too hard. So that's sort of that. And in terms of company size and stage, you're either with an AR CFO or have an accounting firm that helps implement Rillet on basically the customer's behalf, or alternatively is when you have your in-house team and real in-house core accounting functions. That's another entry point that people are really basically taking an interest in Rillet. And then a third one is there is a whole echelon once they're on NetSuite and Sage Intacct. They're either misimplemented or have a bunch of friction around that area, where people are now full on coming off. Like, these are very large businesses, like Series D, E, hundreds of millions of ARR coming over, that are more just like frustrated with their current setup. They've maybe grown quickly and need to re-implement anyways, where there's a lot of opportunity for us there as well to come in. So these are the three ICPs. Either you go through a partner, you have your first in-house accounting team, or you're large and at a scale where things start breaking down and you would have to re-implement NetSuite or Intacct anyways.
Got it. Very interesting. So take us back to the process for raising your Series A. I know it probably feels like an eternity ago, but at the beginning of 2025, you're starting to have conversations, you're building the narrative, all these kinds of things. Can you just talk us through end to end what that process looked like for you? How many investors did you reach out to? How many initial conversations? What were those conversations like? What were the questions that you were getting asked? And how did you ultimately, you talked a little bit about how you ended up choosing Sequoia as your partner. But yeah, just kind of like the end-to-end process of raising that Series A, as fine-grained as you can get. That would be super interesting to hear for this group and for the broader startup ecosystem.
From recollection, because it's been a couple of months and it's like dog years, so like it's like things are moving very quick. But we had early traction in general already earlier in the year around the company. So there's a few investors that tracked us very closely, given just the momentum that the company had. It became obvious in the portfolios of VCs. They heard about Rillet. Can we buy Rillet? This is a legit software. So the signal started intensifying. And what I did as a founder is I, with our parties that we were interested in working together with, we basically start building the dialogue and relationship way, way before you actually enter a process. And I think that's a general piece of advice for everybody that's maybe clear, but founders do underestimate it at times, that like at the end of the day, an investor is very much taking a bet on you as an individual and founder as a team. And so from that regard, it's like, it's just human that people want to get to know the human behind, or humans behind the application that's being built and the traction or the revenue that is being generated. So that's number one. Number two, then we were going that interest built up to an extent where it was clear that if we signaled to the market that we were going to raise a round of funding shortly, that we had enough demand and momentum so we could catalyze enough interest. So I think the sort of tactical advice there is you want to compress time to have maximum momentum, chatter in the market, as well as sort of also for you as a founder, it's a bit of like, it's a different mindset of raising money versus operating a company. It's obviously very fluid how you're going back and forth all the time, but it is a bit of a different game that you play for a period of time. So there, I think compressing it into a certain time frame also gets you into sort of game time mode as a founder, like how to interact, like what is the narrative? You get repeat questions so you can hone the answers and things like that. So compress it in a time frame. For us, that time frame was 8 days. From when we officially kicked off the process to term sheet signature, and which was very fast. And it allowed us to be so fast because we built up that momentum before. And also when we kickstarted the process, and I did that process with my obviously co-founder, but then also I had a chief of staff that helped me prepare some of the answers and really like maintain a data room for us, which made it very quick. If then people have follow-up questions after the first call with me, they're like, cool, this is interesting. Can you send me the data room? 180 seconds later, it was top of their inbox. They could start digging in. So I think we were like well prepared with the materials. I ran a really tight process over 8 days, which was insanely intense. I think I was flying between New York and San Francisco 3 times over that, like back and forth. So six individual flights, taking calls from airports, taxis, and or Ubers everywhere. But it was awesome in a sense that it catalyzed a lot of momentum and excitement around a category that again didn't exist before. So we kind of broke that open, and with our results and a little bit of education that we've done with investors.
Just one observation that really hits home is it sounds like the bulk of the work around your Series A was done well in advance of actually starting to have your investor conversations, which is how you were able to compress that fundraise into 8 days, which is crazy. I've never heard of a fundraise going that quickly, if it wasn't getting preempted by an existing investor or someone knocking down the door. So, yeah, I think that's really key, right? Is VCs are looking to invest in a series of data points that they can collect on a founder. And so you should be building up that rapport with them far in advance of actually walking them through your pitch deck for the first time.
Yeah. And the other thing on that note as well, like the team also, we were very transparent with the team. Hey, we're going to the market. We're going to raise this round. And people were very surprised how quickly we came back with results. And then so the framing was a little bit like, hey, Nick, how did you do that? How did you? And like my answer to them and the team was like, this was us over the course of like 3 years or 2.5 years, however long we've been building a good business that delivers results for investors, but most importantly, makes customers happy. And sort of that cycle was, again, built way in advance of me even having the first conversations leading up to then that fundraise. So investors are sometimes VC and Silicon Valley is a little bit seen as hypey and like just following the next big thing. And sure, there's some truth in this. But if you have a good business, if you truly obsessed over your customers, that they're max successful, you're building in a large enough market and then build these relationships, all that work gets done before the actual, in our case, 8 days of a race.
Yeah. And you mentioned that part of what helped was VCs having portfolio companies who had onboarded into Rillet, which is another tidbit that I've pulled out of a couple of conversations. It really helps if a VC is considering an investment. They can go to some of the founders that they've invested in previously, and the founders tell them, yes, we onboarded onto Rillet. It like believe the hype. It is really like the next generation ERP platform. They're going to eat QuickBooks' lunch, that kind of thing. So did you have some investors who you sourced via your customers who were portfolio companies of the investors?
It happened as well that way, yes. So, or like the interest investors, as they started hearing about the round, they went through their portfolios companies, our customers basically made introductions there. And so, yeah, that's exactly how this sort of came about. And it also makes, again, human or logical sense. You, by proxy, trust obviously the company that you invested in yourself before. You voted with your money by investing in a company. By proxy, that's a very good sort of like gauge of how good that product is if you've trust the team. So like, yeah, it's very much, but it doesn't work for all categories, right? So also all the founders and CFOs out there who work at companies or build companies that are not like a VC category, that's totally fine too. But it is, if you are a part of the VC category one way or another with your customer set, it does help.
Yeah, for sure. So once you got through this 8-day cross country sprint and raised your Series A, um, and then shortly after that, it became apparent that a Series B was potentially on the table. What were some of the conversations that you had with your team, your Series A investors, that helped you to weigh out whether or not it was the right move to follow on with this $70 million just a couple months later?
Yep, great question. So this one, given it went down so fast, so the second one was a preempt. So it went down so fast that we couldn't even fully update the team. We were just dragged into this process, and kind of came back, which is like, hey, we signed a term sheet with Iconic and Andreessen, basically. And so that was a little different internally. So and then, but versus the first round where, again, and I can recommend that, like, bring on board your team, be very transparent about sort of what you're doing, and then they can help and everything else. So that's great. And then in terms of then the round itself, the discussions with the A investors, I think that was the second part of your question, was very it's just basically you're one team at that point, right? You maybe only know each other like intensely for the last couple of months that you've worked together day to day. But at the end of the day, you get an offer like this, the first thing, and turn around, make a phone call to your core parts of your cap table and start discussing. Fortunate that the people we have around the cap table, and that's why we selected them, are very supportive of like founder actions and what we do. Obviously, there was discussions like, should we take this round now? Should we wait? Pros and cons and everything else. But even for investors that may have, in these situations, a founder and investors' interests are mostly aligned, but sometimes not 100%. And what I really appreciate about my cap table, everybody's aware about these potential conflicts of interest. And so we could just talk through them basically very openly. And so it was very clear that it made sense from a customer perspective to get this round. Just more capital on the balance sheet is just a very high signal for sort of very large companies that we have in a sales cycle today that are still like, can we trust this new company? What's going on there? So I think that was a really a no-brainer argument from that perspective. And also just seeing the traction again commercially of the company, you could see how, yes, it's a large round, but how you can see like, okay, in a couple of months we would have raised that round anyways. And if it comes now at like literally like a fraction of the time spent, and we have very high confidence that we're anyways going to at the pace we're executing, you would have done that round pretty soon anyways. It was a no-brainer basically to take the money, especially also from the partners. Again, these were not some sort of second tier brands where you like, or people you're unsure you want to work with. These were people we've known for years in some cases, with very strong reputations and brands, where it just became clear it made sense for the company to move on the offer.
Yeah, I mean, the signal that it sends that Rillet was backed by Sequoia and then Andreessen just a couple of months apart, that definitely should instill some confidence in the market that your platform is going to be around
We're going to
for
be around,
the
yeah.
foreseeable future. And so that has to help with your sales process and all of that. Just as sort of like a kind of academic exercise, and you did cover it within that answer, but could you kind of just lay out sort of the calculus a little bit around the decision to take the money immediately or to wait and spend the money that you raised in the Series A and get more traction, potentially raise at a higher valuation? Like, what were both sides of the table kind of saying there that ultimately led to you landing in the decision to raise the round?
So that we basically, the two sides of the table were it's all about timing, right? So this round was going to come together in short order anyway. So what is the pros behind waiting versus doing it now? Pros and cons. So the pro of doing it now is very clearly you have the traction, you have the momentum. You guys just doubled ARR in like literally 12 weeks. The companies coming on board, the companies in the sales pipeline are really high quality. If you can raise around, again, at very little founder time spent, which in this case was literally 3.5 days until term sheet fully signed and everything sorted out. That was the biggest pro, frankly. So where I would recommend probably against doing this is if you don't have a line of sight into your traction, commercial traction or customer adoption, because then at that point you're starting to over raise money and like you get in this territory as a founder where you really don't want to be. And so I think that was sort of the pro and con, but the signals were pretty clear. And then on the dilution point, where I think that's the biggest argument to wait, frankly. Do you just want to wait? Maybe optimize terms further and dilution further. For me, the outcome of what we're building is so large as a company. Like, just if you think about it, like this is one of the largest software categories in the world. The terms are very attractive of this offer already. could we have optimized basically maybe by waiting for 3 to 4 months to raise the round then and everything else? Maybe. But then the flip side of that, at that point, if you're actively raising around in that market, and then as a founder, you get taken out of the business for, even if it's just a couple of weeks, the opportunity costs of that time are exponentially higher. So it was just the maybe the slight addition, or the slight optimization in terms that you could have received wasn't, in my mind, wasn't worth the basically ability to then put an operational drag on the business if you're out as a founder for too long. And again, the terms were so attractive anyway, so it wasn't really a like, yeah. So from that perspective, it did make sense, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. 3.5 days to raise the B after 8 days to raise the Series A. So it's almost $100 million that you were able to secure in 11 days of work. Obviously, there was all the work that led up to that 11 days, but that's it's not bad for less than 2 weeks of fundraising. A lot of people grind for a lot longer to raise a lot less money, so that's really awesome. Congrats. All right, last question on the fundraise side before we move on to talking about AI and finance, future of work, all that kind of good stuff. Is there any, like, what would be the number one piece of advice that you would give to a founder, aside from some of the other nuggets that you already laid out, that will help them to make their fundraise go more successfully? Or it could be a process thing, it could be a mindset thing, whatever direction you want to take it.
So I think mindset you need to be on. Like, don't fundraise part-time. It's like some founders have this sort of um, or they give the illusion to investors, maybe because they think it's cool to like say like, yeah, I'm just, casually around. I don't need to raise. I'm really focused on running my business, but they really are raising. VCs are very intelligent, and it kind of like, it just shoots your credibility out of the gate. So if you are raising, tell them that you're raising. Be on, bring your best effing self to the table and just go for it. And if you're not raising, that's totally fine too. And then just say that, and then that's okay too. But I think the advice there is just, yeah, avoid the messy middle of trying to maybe either play cool or actually try and do both at the same time. Focus, do one thing well, and then refocus. I think that's probably one piece of advice that I'd have there. And then the other thing is, try and shoot also investors just straight. If you have a good business, if your customers like what you're doing, if you're building it into a large enough market that you fall within the VC grid of criteria that they have and the little check boxes that exist there, just shoot them straight. Again, I think some founders trying to overthink the political games around raising, and they definitely exist, right? There is social proof. There is like, which firms do you approach? Like, do you approach the junior partner first or the senior partner first? All these considerations do matter on the margin. But again, if you as a founder spend all your cycle there thinking through it, I would rather invest the time in preparing better answers and trying to think through on how to actually position and pitch the business. I think people are so smart in the industry that they see through everything that you're doing. So just bring your best self. Ideally, come with an awesome effing business that people love and want to invest in, and just talk about it how you truly think about it, and then treat people well, and then it's like karma a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there may be some things that you could do to optimize around the margins, but I think if you focus on building a business that customers love, it makes those conversations so much easier, and then it means that you don't need to play those games, right? Which it sounds like you did not have to. So that's really well said. Thank you for sharing. Um, all right. Well, I'm sure you've been talking a lot about AI in all of the conversations you've had post fundraise. We've been talking a lot about it at our CFO as well. Um, and particularly, we've been discussing the gap that exists between what you might see scrolling through social media about how companies are transforming their businesses using AI, and how if you're not using AI, you're falling
Left
behind.
behind. Yep.
Yeah, versus the reality of implementation of AI in businesses today. From your perspective, and specifically maybe even within the finance stack, what's actually being automated today versus what's still under development and a little bit of smoke and mirrors?
Yep. So AI is grabbing a lot of headlines. There is something big coming, which is very exciting. That's also why we're here, and why we exist. But the reality is, as a buyer maybe of software that's maybe most useful for your audience, I would really push into sort of the question that you're alluding to, is like, what are things that are actually working? Show me repeatedly, show me in production. Like, don't give me one-time use cases in Sandbox that are a little bit amorphous. So the things that I do see work tactically, which is very exciting, is all the use cases on data ingestion around like researching transactions. So, for example, cash matching and then reconciliation of cash transactions and balances. So that is a great use case where AI can be applied. It can research transactions, it can get information, it can compare sort of columns and things like that that are very powerful. Same with parsing through PDFs or things like that. So, for example, if you have a prepaid schedule on a bill that you want to use the service period for a prepaid amortization, that is a great application and use case where you can have that PDF run through an LLM that pick out all the right data and like help you with that. So on the input side, very powerful. And then on the output side, similar things. You can run custom reports. You can type in natural language, or like build me a report of my expenses over a certain period of time, or my revenue by customer, by segment. And it can just spit out reports and analysis, literally within like the 2-second lag time that you have if you ping OpenAI or Anthropic in the background. So these are awesome use cases. They work. The area where I get a little bit more skeptical as a buyer, and I just myself don't see it work today, is these highly general use cases of the accounting agent that magically closes and your books, reconciles everything for you, reports out for you, and it is one click. That's sort of where my sort of alarm bells goes off, because there is just the ability to do the opportunity to get things wrong. The wider your prompts are, increasingly increases exponentially, basically. And so there, like, so more narrow use cases, a bit more targeted, is much more successful. Hopefully we'll get to the other thing over time, but today that's where I'd be a bit more skeptical.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've seen the chart about an agent that can perform a task with 95% accuracy. If it's doing 10 tasks, like that ends up being like a 50% success rate or something like that. I don't know if those numbers are exactly correct, but you know that when you're trying to chain together a bunch of actions, and any one action in the chain can lead to an unsuccessful operation overall, like, yeah, that's definitely a tricky place to be, especially in finance where the margin for error is so small. But just to clarify, so the cash reconciliations and prepaid schedules and those sorts of things, are those AI use cases working inside of the Rillet platform today? Are these things that customers are using reliably?
Yes. So these are things. One of them, we are just. This is maybe a little early preview. We're just in the process of rolling out into production. But yes, the cash rec is working. Prepaids are working as well. There's certain nuances and edge cases in PDFs that we're still working through. But yes, it is working in production, and it is fascinating, basically.
That's very cool. What are the next couple of agentic features that you're looking to roll out over the next year or so?
We so in next year, I couldn't even tell you, because we think in much shorter time increments, Rillet. So we have sort of a long-term vision where we directly want to head to, and then plan out the next couple of weeks, very short term, into sort of a medium-term roadmap into then maybe 1 or 2 quarters. So in terms of the AI use cases I'm personally most excited about, is everything around reporting, dashboarding, and generation of reports, basically. So there's a world, ideally, let's use your 1 year example. Hopefully it's earlier. Maybe it's going to be later, depending on how fast we progress with the technology. Is ideally you can just click a button and generate a board deck, basically from the ground up, or like even like have basically a board deck that currently exists, update numbers and things like that as part of it. That would be an awesome use case to sort of work towards. That would make a lot of CFOs, CEOs, and board members very happy. And yeah, aspirationally, that's where we want to get to. That would be personally the one that I'm probably most excited about.
I agree. That does sound very compelling. You mentioned your high level directional vision. Could you maybe speak to that for a little bit? So zooming out 5 years from now, or whatever long term is in the world of AI, could be less than 5 years. Yeah, what does the Rillet product look like? What parts of the tech stack are you ultimately hoping to, sort of manage for your customers?
Yep. ERP is an amorphous term, and we purposely decided to go with a very wide and large term. We're a very ambitious team, so we're trying to want to have max surface area to grow into over time. In terms of the 5-year plan, my hope is to automate a lot of the month-end workflows to the extent where the human just needs to log into a interface, which is likely Rillet, could even be somewhere else, but likely Rillet, where you log in, click approve, click, yep, I've reviewed this, I've handled these 3 exceptions manually, and that's it. If we get to that state, you could be a $500 million revenue run rate business, basically closing their books in, let's say, a couple of hours, just by going in, approving, reviewing, sending things out, getting sign off from people, all in sort of an end-to-end chained way. That will be awesome as sort of a vision state, for speed, but also reporting quality. So that's sort of at least direction where we're going to go. And with that, and that's maybe counterintuitive. I spoke about that in one of my LinkedIn posts. It's a little counterintuitive maybe to a lot of founders and product people out there. But my goal is actually to drastically reduce time spent in application at Rillet. So our key North Star metric is not DAUs, daily active users. It is actually the goal over time, as the technology gets better and better, is to reduce time spent in the application. And so I think just that world where you just close your books as an accounting team with just a few interactions that are mostly reviews and sign-offs in a couple of years, deliver financials to a whole organization within like 12 hours of like midnight of month end, that would be awesome, and that's sort of what we're working towards.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen you writing about, I think you call it maybe day zero close or continuous close, something along those lines, which is obviously a very compelling vision for the accounting space. What do you think is the biggest roadblock to achieving that as of today?
2 things. Number 1, it is the upstream integrations and data quality from some of the upstream systems that's causing accountants today doing the work a lot of pain, like for all the folks out there who have to reconcile Stripe and Salesforce and like bring all the cobble together that with like PDFs and Excels lying somewhere around there to get to a correct deferred revenue number on a specific customer or contract. So for all these folks out there, I think that is sort of one key hindrance where the dispersion of data across different systems is just extremely high in some cases still. And then you can make the argument that AI will solve all of these, which I hope is correct. But I do think there's a bunch of nuance in there and just like raw data quality of like cleaning and making sure this information comes in accurate. So that's one area where I personally focus a lot is our native integrations, what data fields get mapped, how can we get more context, more data. That's sort of number 1, I think, thing that needs to happen to achieve the 0-day close. And then the other thing is the AI needs to be it needs to be accurate. Like you can't, and so not everything's AI in sort of that 0-day close, but like the parts that are AI need to be accurate because to your point before, 95% is not good enough. And so that's, I think, the second piece where the not even the breadth of the use cases, but the repeatably and quality of the results need to be so high that people start truly trusting. And then I think if we have these 2 components, the right upstream system data quality and getting that piece together with highly accurate models, I do think a controller at a sizable company will start trusting Rillet to do the operation that they would do in 20 days in a couple of hours. But these 2 things really need to be in place, otherwise it won't work.
Yeah. Out of those two, that's I really like that breakdown. Out of those two potential paths, or it likely will end up being a combination of these two things that leads to the 0-day close. But which of those two do you think is more important? I guess another way of asking that question is, do you think the models need to get better from here in order to enable that? Or do you think it is a matter of cleaning the data and providing the models with the appropriate context, and that with like this generation of models, you can get to that vision that you're talking about?
Great question. And I don't have let's start there. I don't have the definitive answer to your question. If I
Come
did,
on.
that would be worth a lot. I do think the path there is available today. The difference between a 10x better model from here and a roughly or a 2x better model in the next 5 years, which is really a reasonable assumption, but like could be again 100,000, 10,000. At the rapid if we're growing, like it could be exponentially bigger. But like assuming you stay roughly constant, the amount of the UX and UI interactions that the user has to get to that zero-day close look very different to one where the model is like, let's say, 100,000 times better than it is today. And the key difference is just how many manual intervention points are there to sign things off. And for me personally, it just boils down to kind of a different UX UI paradigm where one will be a lot smoother and slicker and easier to use, less mental load with the better models. And if it's worse models, you can still achieve it, but you have more mental load because there's more individual steps and sign-offs just to make sure things are accurate. And that's sort of the difference in paths in my mind.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. If the models don't get 10,000 times better from here, then the back end probably looks like a set of individual agents who are each responsible for a very targeted piece of the month end close. Whereas if they do continue on their trajectory, then maybe it could just be one or a handful of models that are able to run the whole thing end to end.
Yeah, with less checkpoints basically in there. So it's exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah. It is very exciting, but as I'm sure you are aware, a lot of the accounting and finance industry is probably a bit conflicted and torn between feeling really excited and also feeling a sense of existential dread. So, how do you think about enabling accounting and finance professionals through your platform versus disintermediating them, or at least bringing them along on the journey and enabling their success in the future?
Yeah. So for me, I get that question obviously a lot, and I do deeply empathize and understand the feeling and sentiment, right? It's an industrial revolution. Certain jobs that existed back then did not exist anymore 10 years later. So I do think there will be change to the types of work that gets done. And that's where I'm so optimistic about all of this, is I think what maybe accounting professionals today don't fully understand is how scarce their skill set actually is. So if you had an infinite supply of accountants, as an example, the world would need 500 or 500 of a certain unit of accountants, or like whatever the number is, 5 million, whatever the number may be. We're probably currently at 100 or 150. So we're literally like 3 to 4, 5x off an equilibrium that is healthy and would be needed by businesses. So in my mind is the 100 that exists today versus the 500 that should be, that gap, the 400 delta there will be just like optimized away with AI before anybody's losing any of their jobs. And then in the 100, there is just going to be a reshuffle of certain tasks. So maybe the staff accountant that spent their first 2 years of their career coding cash transactions somewhere in a basement may not exist anymore in that form, but we'll be doing something completely different but still being part of that 100 that's desperately needed. So I think it's just a matter of A, filling the gap, B, retraining and reshuffling. And for folks that are nimble and willing to do that, there will be plenty of job opportunity to prove themselves, earn more money, work a weekend less seriously. Like that, it's the hours that people are pulling are insane. So it's just I think there is a huge ability there to just reshuffle opportunity versus like true job loss, but for the folks that may be stubborn, really stubborn on what they're currently doing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is another topic that we've been talking about at length at Air CFO, the future of the accounting and finance role and what we will be able to achieve that we don't have time for today because we spend so much time just moving numbers around on a spreadsheet and making sure that all of the financials are tying out. I'd be really curious to hear your perspective on what you think the role of the finance and accounting professional could become in the future as AI is able to take on a larger piece of the traditional job description.
Yeah. It's a little trite, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's so that strategic part that everybody's talking about. Everybody wants to do strategic finance, strategic accounting, strategic insert. So I don't think like strategy itself doesn't hold much value, but I think what account or like the term, I think what people mean by it, which I truly believe in, is people will be able to focus on tasks that are just like higher impact if gotten right for the company. So that would mean if you can do an analysis that you never had time for because you're always down to the wire for your close deadlines, but now all of a sudden you do have time to maybe analyze your DSOs in a greater amount of detail, quickly understand actually which vendor we're paying on which terms, can we maximize cash flow there? Can we maybe look at a sort of customer churn metrics and figure out what's going on there? Like these type of insights, again, called strategic, which I don't love as a term, but like will actually move the business much more forward than sort of if assuming everything else gets done at the same quality that it gets done today. So I think that's one side of the element where you're truly becoming a business partner, whatever you want to call it, to the company. And the other side is also just a much more human side of the, I think, work where with these insights, you will then all of a sudden go to your head of engineering or whatever the person may be and actually talk through things, have ideas, and push the business forward that way. So I think a long rambling answer to like maybe creative accounting sounds terrible because that has sort of a potentially a bad rep, but like it's just a much more creative part to the work where accounting numbers get used, is I think where this is going. And I think it's very exciting, again, for the caliber and person that really enjoys doing that. And for the ones that have a little bit of trouble with it today, learn it. I promise you will enjoy that type of work over time. And it'll be hugely valuable for your company or organization that you're currently at.
Yeah. I love the idea of unlocking the latent creativity within all the accountants out there. I'll give you a really quick pitch of the role, the sketch of the role that we've been talking about at Air CFO. We kind of think about it as a 3-level pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, you have systems architecture, because configuring all these systems, integrating them together, making sure that they're running effectively. Somebody's still going to need to do that. The AI is not going to make itself run smoothly 100% of the time. So having someone minding that, and also just making the most out of all of the platforms that already have a lot of really powerful features today. That's going to be a key value driver for the finance and accounting professional. The second layer of the pyramid we call business intelligence. So you can think of that as just extracting insights from all of the data that's coming out of those systems that you've configured correctly. And then the third level of the pyramid is pretty similar to what you were talking about with the human side, which we call sort of performance coaching or performance optimization. So working cross-functionally with other members of the organization, aligning on what are the key metrics that determine the success of that department within the organization, and then working with them to improve those metrics. And I think accounting and finance professionals are really well positioned to do all of those things. And those are things that in a lot of cases people just don't have time to do today because they are bottlenecked by all of the tactical, just, getting the numbers out of the spreadsheet and into the GL. So that's what we're working towards at Air CFO, and what we're sort of trying to prepare our team to be able to do as AI takes on more and more of the tactical role.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'll borrow some of this. It's actually a really nice way of laying it out.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll share the article with you, because we're definitely trying to start the conversation around it, right? I feel like there hasn't been a ton of conversation happening around what are the accountants going to do, like how are people going to adapt. And I think as much leeway as we can give people, or as much runway as we can give people to sort of figure out what skills they'll need to build and level themselves up into, the better it's going to turn out for everyone. If you had to give some more advice to an accounting and finance professional who's trying to future-proof themselves, what would you say that they should be focused on over the next couple of months to get ready for the future of finance that Rillet and all these other companies are executing on?
Yeah. I would say so. The way we operate Rillet and how we're working internally, just it's extremely tactically focused on like the next big thing, making the next customer happy, solving the next problem. And so a little bit similar to how we operate internally, I think the piece of advice would be like focus on something that you can do with AI today. Whatever task you're doing, like it doesn't even have to be a fancy task or a task you're doing all the time. Maybe spend the 30 seconds of just dropping it into a ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever model or interface you have, in a permissioned and safe way. So with all the disclaimers on the compliance side, especially if it's sensitive information, but just start using the tools, see where they're good at, see where they suck, see like how they evolve. And that's, I think, the best way to just get started. Just start using the stuff, try what works today, and whatever does work, keep using it and doing that. And I think that's much more better than trying to read a book or do a course. Just start doing and then see where it takes you, because it'll be exciting. You'll see the trajectory and kind of get roped into it yourself with excitement.
I completely agree with that advice. And I think if someone starts playing around with the tools, you'll see that they do give you superpowers in some areas, but there are some areas where they still fall very short. So I think it may also make finance and accounting professionals a little bit more, it might make them feel a little bit better about
Yes.
the AI's potential to completely eliminate the role that they do, because if a human takes up a bundle of tasks, AI is not going to replace that entire bundle anytime soon, and humans will be adaptable. And I think there's a lot of other things that accounting and finance professionals can add to organizations. So yeah, but being able to work with the AI is going to become a more and more valuable skill going forward. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, but yeah, so just getting as many reps in as you can is definitely a good place to start. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nick.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Really happy that we were able to make this happen. And I think that the startup community, as well as the finance and accounting community, will really take a lot out of this conversation. So we're really rooting for you at Rillet, and looking forward to following along with the journey.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thank you guys for listening in.